Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for taking time to attend our topic of the meeting, which is finding our inner voice. So let me introduce our panelists. I'll start with myself. So my name is Keerthi Nagothu. I'm a cybersecurity professional with work experience in different locations in the world, and currently the security lead at Ballot Power Systems. I was born and brought up in India, worked a bit in London, moved to Bermuda for a couple of years, and I'm currently in Vancouver. So far, the journey has been amazing. My work experience comprises building cybersecurity strategies, developing security initiatives, incident response, risk assessments, and adopting a holistic approach to security at an enterprise level. I have a passion to encourage more women into cybersecurity, and I'm currently serving the role of president for VISA's Western Canada affiliate. Apart from this, I do give lectures at my alma mater, which is Symbiosis International University, India. Outside of work, I love playing badminton, traveling, which was a thing for me before COVID. And I'm also a fan of extreme sports. Also, let me take the pleasure of introducing our next panelist, who is Arti Gadia. Arti Gadia is originally from Kenya. She moved to UK to pursue a degree in financial economics. In 2004, she immigrated to Vancouver, Canada, and currently works for Buckrout. Her mission is to break down barriers and boundaries to achieve equality for underrepresented groups in STEM and in leadership. She founded Standout to lead to empower women in cybersecurity to join corporate boards. She also founded sharing her empowerment with mission to be a collective voice within the organization to influence change and close the gender diversity gap. Arti joined OWASP Vancouver board to increase diversity and encourage women to be speakers. She also volunteers her time with Isaka Vancouver. She leads tech. She was recently quoted in Canadian Security magazine as she shared her views on the importance of soft skills to break down barriers in traditional hiring. Arti was nominated in Top 20 Women in Cybersecurity Honorary Award by Visecra and IT World Canada. She was recently a judge for African Women in Security Network. In 2020, she was featured in The Rise of Cyber Women, Volume 2, as she shared her safari of experiences to be a change agent and pave the path for future generations. Due to her international background, she loves to travel and learn different cultures. If you're seeing her post on LinkedIn titled Pulka Roti, you'll know why she enjoys cooking. The next on our panel is Patience Mpofu. Patience Mpofu is a technical development lead at Felix Payments. In her role, Patience focuses on improving and optimizing the full software development lifecycle for mobile point of sale systems. Over the past 8 years of her working experience, she has worked on various enterprise mobile and web development within the financial services industry and is passionate about building robust and secure applications. The last on our panel is Erin Davis. Erin is a connector, change maker, and builder of inclusive workplace cultures. She continues to follow her passion on building workplaces that work for women and accepted the role of Director of Corporate Engagement Western Canada with Catalyst. Previously, Erin was a Director of Global Talent Engagement at Stantec and led their global inclusion strategy. Erin was honored to receive both the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion Award as D&I Practitioner of the Year in Western Canada, as well as Catalyst Canada Honors Award in the Emerging Leader category for her work in diversity and inclusion space in 2018. Outside her organization, she's the chair of Edmonton Business Diversity Network, a director with Explore Edmonton, and was recently appointed to the City of Edmonton's Community Safety and Wellbeing Task Force. Erin currently lives in Edmonton with her 2 amazing children and also works to teach them about a world where inclusion truly matters. Now that I'm done with the introduction with our panelists, let me give you a short description of our topic of the day. So our topic of the day is, even in inclusive workplaces, there are occasions where you're left out. On top of that, remote working has its role of no personal interaction. Have you ever felt it that way? It might be easy for some personalities, but for others, it may not. How do you let others know that you want to be included and want to be part of the discussions? Did the fear of being belittled stop you from speaking up? How do you handle such situations? How to show others your authentic self without changing your personality to seek validation to fit in? Now that I've explained the narrative of the topic, let us delve into the topic. And I just want to quote, one of the quotes said by Steve Jobs, which is, "Don't let the noise of others' opinion drown out your own inner voice." With that note, can any of you share a tidbit of story about being left out of conversations or doubting your inner voice? Do you think it's related to personality, stereotyping, or what was the environment like, why you were left out? Arti, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, thanks, Manny. I'll share a story from 20 years ago when I first felt this experience and where I lost my inner voice, and then bring it back to what many underrepresented groups face in our industry. I was really interested in going abroad to study, and despite being the youngest and the only daughter, both my parents supported me to pursue a degree. And I accepted this offer at the University of Wales in the UK. And I was placed in a dorm where there was 7 of us, and we shared a common kitchen. And I saw them, the 7 of us friends, I saw them as my first friends. I was in a new country, foreign place, the Western world. And I trusted them because it's, first few days, that's who your dorm mates are your friends. I had this Kenyan accent, and I wasn't really interested at that time in drinking alcohol. I never thought I was different. I was very confident about who I was. In the first weekend, everyone was in the kitchen and planning to go to a nightclub. I was excited. I thought this would be so much fun because I love dancing. We got to the nightclub, we went to the dance floor, and then slowly, everyone started leaving me and giving me an excuse that they were going to get a drink. I still didn't notice what was happening, but that inner voice was telling me they didn't want to be around me. I was fighting that inner voice. I soon found myself on my own on the dance floor, all by myself. I mean, there were other people who I didn't know, but none of my dorm friends were around. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. And in Kenya, coming from Kenya, you just don't go on a cab on your own. It's not safe for women. And I found myself, I needed to do something. So I walked out. I asked the bouncers where the phone booth was. In 1998, a cell phone was a luxury. I had 3 pounds in my wallet, which barely gets you 3 minutes of talk time. I called my parents, and it was 1 a.m. UK time, which was a 3-hour difference, 4 a.m. Kenya time. And pouring down with tears, I asked my parents, is it safe to get on a cab? Because that's all I could get in those 3 minutes. And my dad informed me not to worry. And he gave me a little bit of courage. And my mom said, that's okay. Once you get there, just give me a call. And thankfully, I got back to the campus safely. The whole night, I didn't sleep as I was in tears. I wanted to quit university and go back to Kenya. The next day at 7 a.m., before everyone woke up, I got ready and I left as I didn't want to face them. I called my brothers for support and advice, and I met with the international officer, and he offered to move me to another dorm. Once all that was sorted, I waited until it was midnight to go back to my room because I didn't want to face them. I didn't know what to say. I'd lost my voice. I got back, I quietly packed my items and moved to a friendlier dorm. I had lost my voice. And this is what happens today in the workplace. Sometimes you may feel different, or you may be the only female on your team and we get left out. We get talked over in meetings, boardrooms, and sometimes even when we're asking questions and engaging with the team, our ideas will be turned down. Sometimes you'll be engaging, but you'll still be invisible and not heard. In the end, what happens to many underrepresented groups when you don't feel included or you have to constantly prove yourself, what happens is you leave the organization. And we're scared to speak up because of the fear of that our future careers will get impacted as leaders have a larger network. We lose our confidence, we lose our voice, and we leave the organization. And that's what's happening today. You'll get to hear more as we have more questions, but that's what's happening. So this is my journey.
Thanks for sharing your journey, which is very personal, sharing with the rest of the group. And I totally agree with, being left with the conversations, not only, personally, but also at workplaces. People might be doing intentionally or unintentionally. Whatever the case, there are occasions faced by many of us in the same way. So, Patience, you do work with women who code. Can you quote us an example as to whether it's you or any person that you know of who's left out of discussions?
Sure. So I am not going to quote an example from my experience with women who code, but a personal experience that happened to me professionally. When I first made my start out in software development, I joined this company. It was in a different company from where I'm originally from. And I'd not experienced a lot of being left out of conversations or being talked over because I'd been in school in that country the whole time. So this was like my first experience of how differently you can be treated in the work environment. Get there, I got my visa. I'm so excited. It's my first job. It's what I've always wanted. I get into some meetings, and then people deliberately start using a language that I don't understand. And I could only pick out a few words. And from those meetings, I would go out and then ask other people and say, like, I couldn't understand what they were saying, but I heard them say this word and that word. What does that mean? And then people would be like, well, what they actually mean is you're foreign and, you know, you shouldn't be here and things like that. So a lot of that happened at the very beginning of my career at the time. And it really affected my confidence because at the time I was the kind of person who really, really wanted to fit in and who really wanted to be liked and who really wanted to do the right thing and keep that job that I was so excited about. And I just felt I couldn't win because I couldn't speak the language. There's no way I would ever get to the point where I could speak it comfortably and without an accent. People would always know I'll be different. And to add on to that, I couldn't do my work properly because I'm not supported. And the meetings that are going on work that affects the work that I'm doing, I can't really be a part of, and I don't understand what's going on. I continually have to go and check on somebody else and ask, well, there was a meeting and I'm not even sure what they said. Can you just give me a summary, and so on and so on. So it happened a lot in the beginning of my career, and because of that, I became the kind of person who would I would look at certain companies as I was applying for new jobs, and I wouldn't even apply if I could see that the majority of people there spoke a certain language, because obviously I'm not going to fit in. I couldn't speak up about what was going on because, I mean, I just felt like I'm being a problem already. They don't want me here. And then if I speak up, then how long is my career going to last anyway here? So it was one of those that I just kept going, kept trying to do the best I can. And then, as Arti said, eventually you just leave the organization without really like speaking up because you feel like your voice will never be heard. And that's just how you end up losing your voice.
Thanks for sharing, Patience. Thanks for that. So, by hearing this two tidbits of the stories, is this because people have stereotyped women can only do certain things, women are not technically capable, or there is somehow this unconscious bias within each of us about what women can do and cannot? So, Erin, so there is a lot of research done at Catalyst, right? So, can you share your thoughts on gender barriers and stereotypes out there, and how working from home is making it difficult even more? General examples would be something like women being talked over in virtual meetings, or which prevents them from sharing their opinions.
Yeah, thanks, Manny, and thanks, Arti and Patience, for sharing your stories. It's definitely part of the work that I do on a daily basis at Catalyst. And as much as I don't want to hear those stories, they are daily occurrences for women in the workplace. And so I think a key part of this work is sharing our stories and sharing those experiences so that they can be overcome. From our research at Catalyst and what we see on a day-to-day basis, gender bias is ingrained in society, and it's almost automatic. Even the most progressive among us can be guilty of it. These biases function as an invisible barrier for women in the workplace. And so if we're going to achieve gender equality, we have to learn how to identify our unconscious biases and start actively working against it. And so I remind everyone that it's human to have unconscious biases. They're part of a mental model that we hold as human beings, but it's part of a journey to really understand how we can first have self-awareness that those biases exist, and then really take the opportunity to pause and understand how they might be showing up in a day-to-day basis. And some of the examples that I can share in a virtual space is women being talked over and not being given space for their voice to be heard, to be part of the dialogue. Even though many people might be working from home, there's still informal conversations happening, what we would sort of call water cooler talk, or connections being had by those in positions of power. And so again, the step back is to understand, am I being exclusionary in who I'm speaking with and who I'm having these conversations with? I know for working parents, it's been a bit of a struggle with kids potentially being at home with you. And so are women put into a scenario where they're made to feel guilty if their kid comes in and on camera when they're in a meeting? Or is there an understanding of that is just part of the world that we're working in, and we want to be able to provide inclusive spaces for working parents or caregivers or whatever anyone's personal circumstances are. So yes, there are daily occurrences of gender biases showing up in the workplace. No, it's not something that only happens to women, but our research shows that there is a lot more bias towards women in the workplace that we still have to overcome.
Thanks, Erin. Thanks for sharing those thoughts, and actually supported by factual representation. So now that we have, we know that there's a problem which is consistent across the board. What are you guys' thoughts on how it's impacting the ecosystem, whether it's building the perceptions or increasing the diversity? What are your thoughts on that? Let me start with Erin.
I talked about the fact that this is something that shows up every single day, and it's part of an active conversation. And I think it's important to sort of think about how we can all be change agents in this conversation as well. That this isn't just women's work, it's everyone's work in gender partnership to understand how can we create a more inclusive workplace. I think that's part of what needs to be considered as well. Is it feels like a little bit of a utopia, but we're working towards a place where everyone can show up and be themselves. It doesn't matter what age you are or what your race is. We want to celebrate those unique things, absolutely, but we want to give equal voice to everyone who is at the table, and really start to think about whose voice aren't we listening to. And I even see in the comments, there's someone sharing that they have been, they're the only female team member. And so unfortunately, that's kind of common for a lot of people. And so if imagine being the only in the room and bringing your ideas forward and not having an ally there to say, hey, that was a really great idea, let's build upon that. And there's research again that shows that that doesn't happen, that support for women's ideas at the table. And so part of this work in gender partnership is how can we help bring men into the conversation and have them show up to support the dialogue as well.
Thanks for sharing your thoughts. Arti, what do you think, how it's impacting our ecosystem?
Yeah, no, I echo what Erin mentioned. If I go back to my story, I wanted to leave and I lost my confidence, right? And this is what's happening in our industry. We're not retaining women because we're leaving, or, underrepresented groups. I haven't seen the retention numbers or seen organizations release any of the retention numbers. But one thing I can tell you for sure that I've heard from many women who have left and their job because they lost their inner voice. I mean, just even yesterday, I received this text message from a friend, and she had to leave the organization. She didn't have another job, but she had to do it for mental health. It was affecting her quite a lot. And she's got another new job, so super excited. But still, the fact that she had to leave her job, she lost her confidence. She had to rebuild her confidence. I mean, we all have rights. I know for me, it took me a long time, but through my safari, I've learned, and I finally found my voice back. But going back to your question, the second piece is I'm in sales and my customers are diverse. If you don't have a diverse team, how will you ensure your product will be sellable to a diverse audience? You have to look at who your audience is. They're not all going to be like you. So if you've got a diverse audience. And then the final piece is the other aspect to this is it's like doing a puzzle. And my husband and I my husband was trying to find a piece that fit. And on the picture, he looks at it based on the picture and he couldn't find it. Whereas I look at it through a different way, is through the shape of a puzzle and the way it's cut. And then I figure it out. And it's different ways of how we do it. And now applying the same situation in the workplace, if you exclude somebody because they have a different thought process, how will that impact the company? How will it impact the products? Think about how it's going to impact the revenue. Like if I was able to find it a different way, but faster, right? And then think about it, how it's going to impact the customers.
Right, definitely. I think that those are really great pointers, Arti, like talking about, bringing that diverse, impact onto the product itself. Like if you don't sell a diverse product, how are you going to sell it to everyone, right? Because you're only focusing on one group if you have only one group of people working for it. Patience, I would like to hear, what are your thoughts on how it's impacting the ecosystem as a whole?
I think what I've encountered most of the time is that it becomes harder and harder to retain talent and to make sure that your talent is diverse. Because if they feel unwelcome, they will obviously start looking out to try and see what else is out there, and they will eventually leave. And once you have those voices leave, it means as times are changing and people are becoming more and more diverse and finding different ways to make their products better and to target different markets, you lose that little bit of market share that you could have gotten by having a voice from someone who speaks differently or who sees the world differently or who has a different background from yours. And then the second thing is that sometimes it gets to the point where it actually affects the reputation of an organization sometimes, because employees will complain about it, to be sure, but eventually also the products that you produce, because they don't actually target a wide market, will raise a lot of complaints. And in the end, you lose a lot in terms of revenue.
Right, definitely, for sure. It's also like expanding your, product into different markets, understanding the diverse, interest, and getting to that product. But I think the impact on the ecosystem, it's not just simple for a person. I think it's broader than that. The reason why I'm saying is that it's just a perception as to what is cybersecurity. Everybody thinks about hacking, and cybersecurity is not just hacking. It has a variety of roles. The breadth and the depth of the roles is quite different. It starts from governance, and hacking or penetration testing, vulnerability scanning are like one of the pillars that you look in cybersecurity. There are different roles that people can transition from different industries into cybersecurity. I think we're there itself creating that image, like, women can be in here, because we created that image of like a hacker, promoting everywhere, saying that this is the person who needs to be in cybersecurity, which is eventually like, okay, so a person who's new to the field kind of makes this image in her mind or his mind, saying that, okay, it's only for hackers, it's not for me. So shutting down your inner voice is happening internally and externally as well, which is your internal own voice saying that, I can't do this. And there is external factor, which is also kind of adding to that, saying that, you can't really do that because this is what the market is. So adding to that, so considering all these factors, how do you work on your inner voice and also speak up to the occasion when needed? And what are the tools or the techniques that we can make use of, keeping our authentic self, voice your opinion without seeking validation from others, specifically from individuals, which is like internal, and also from leaders? To add to that question, I also want to pick a comment in the chat saying that I saw a comment saying it feels like senior leadership is supportive, increasing women into cybersecurity, but the message isn't necessarily getting down to recruiters and sometimes hiring managers. That was a great point. I think this discussion is going to bring that up. So let me start with Arti. Arti, what are your thoughts on what are the tools that we need to look at, specifically for individuals as well as for leaders to get into this?
Yeah, so I'll start off with probably the leader, since that was the question that was asked. So if you're a leader, my advice is, first and foremost, if you notice such behavior, or if you notice where someone on your team is currently talking over an individual, speak up. I think I heard an earlier talk as well. That's the same thing. We've got to, as a leader, whether it's us or other leaders, there's so many leaders that don't say anything. It will make them cringe, but they don't speak up. And that's one of the things I want to encourage more leaders today is speak up, right? Some of us have lost our voice and we don't know what to say, and you've got that leadership position. And then pull them aside. That's another piece, right? Is pull them aside and help that individual who is trying to talk over somebody and help them understand what they did. Sometimes you'll notice that the individual wasn't aware of what they were doing for a long time. And this is bringing back awareness. And then, I mean, to leaders, don't just sit and do nothing. And you know, I know that question there, because I sometimes it just gets me frustrated when leaders do nothing. But this is what we need to constantly remind leaders, or, you know, when I've noticed something, I will go in and individually speak to that leader. By the way, did you notice this? Because sometimes even leaders don't notice this. And for a long time, this is what's happened, right? And then reflect on it. Reflect on yourself if you're the one as a leader that's done it, and someone's come up to you. Be open to that feedback. I would also advise leaders to try reverse mentoring. This is a really important one. And last year, one of our chief marketing officers, he actually wanted me to mentor him. And he wanted to see things through my lens. And that's an amazing way for a leader to understand the problem. In fact, he himself noticed something and he didn't speak up. And later on, during our sessions, I said, what could you have done in that situation? And he realized, he's like, yeah, I didn't speak up. So this reverse mentoring is amazing. I'm a big fan of it. I mean, through that, we created this mentor match. But going back to other tools, now, if you're not a leader, but if you're where I am, because I don't have that leadership position, but have faced this, what could you do? What are the tools? First and foremost is the internal tool. Don't change who you are, and don't compromise your personal values. For me, I remember in 2005, I was applying for a position within the organization. The director asked me to fill this personality test. My manager warned me that only those that fit a certain category were successful in the next phase of the interview. And the assumption is if you were type A personality or had the gift of the gab, you would be successful. I wasn't. I was an introvert. And for me, I believed listening and curiosity was important. And someone needs to accept who I am. You can't always keep hiring the person that always runs to the drawing board, right? You can't always hire the same person who's always the one who talks the most, right? I don't believe in that. I believe that everyone should be respected, and success isn't defined as the person that talks the most, right? And of course, for me, I answered it the way I was, because I kept myself, my authentic self. I did not get that promotion. Thankfully, someone else saw my potential and offered me a job, and I proved the leaders wrong, and this resulted in removing that awful test. But if I go back into some of the external, I mean, the internal one is don't change who you are, speak up. And the external tools that I've leveraged is like through my, where I felt it's safe. It's a safe environment to speak freely. And this can be in a form of a mentor. You may have heard many talks today about find a mentor or a group of friends or family. And for me, this was through when I started up sharing her empowerment and stand out to lead. I've got my supporters that I could always go to. And over time, I've built this really good group that I trust. And I highly recommend finding that safe group of friends or a mentor. In fact, one of my mentors who was the one who actually explained to me about a situation I was in. I didn't know the concept retaliation. And he actually explained to me what that scenario was and helped me understand that we have our rights, and that was wrong. And it was hard to speak up, but trust me, I've been there, and for a long time, I didn't speak up. And now when I speak up, I know the reason why I'm speaking up is is because I'm fighting for equality. If I don't speak up, the individual will do the same thing to somebody else. And we need to put a stop to this.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that, Arti. I think there were some great pointers right there, talking about reverse mentoring, talking about finding a mentor, finding your support group, and also talking talking to your inner self, finding that voice. There's a great comment, and we have two people talking about this, which is the imposter syndrome, because you're constantly judging yourself and then your inner self, not letting you to speak out when the time is needed. Erin, what are your thoughts about, like, what are the tools that people can work on this, their inner self, leaving out that imposter syndrome and speaking to that occasion? What are your thoughts on that?
Thanks, Manny. A couple thoughts on that. I sort of building off what Arti said, I refer to it as building your own personal board of directors. And this idea of who are those closest individuals to you that you can go and say, this is happening at work. What are your thoughts? I'm looking at making a career change. I'm looking at, I want to take on maybe this promotion, and getting their thoughts, because again, we can be our own worst critic. And when we share our thoughts or ideas from what's going on in our head out loud to someone else, you can just get such great feedback, right? Like, that personal board of directors is going to be your biggest cheerleaders and champions. So I would say that's a great way to overcome and start to shift your mental model to, I'm going to focus on what I'm really good at and be really firm in going back to this idea of mentorship. I encourage everyone to bring the language of sponsorship into the fold as well. And a mentor is someone who talks with you. A sponsor is someone who talks about you. And so we know from our research what career advancement looks like. I would say predominantly from a North American perspective, it's about who you know, not what you know, about who you know. And so as you start to look at broadening your network and the individuals that you know, and we have great tools at our disposal to reach out to individuals, and I'm specifically thinking LinkedIn, but obviously there's lots of ways to reach out to individuals and say, hey, I'd love to have a 15-minute virtual connection with you, stating, I'm really interested in your career and hearing more about it. I think most people, from my experience, are willing to give that time and energy to someone who has gone out on a little bit of a ledge to say, I want to learn more. I admire what you've done. I admire what you've accomplished in your career. Can we start to build that relationship? And by maybe a conversation that starts as mentorship could potentially turn into sponsorship, because they now know what you're capable of and they can start sharing that more broadly. So I think keep that in mind. And then I sort of have 3 tips of like being seen. So making sure people know what your accomplishments are. Women often put their heads down and go, I'm going to work really hard and people are going to notice. And that's what's going to advance me. It's not. People need to know about that hard work. So be seen, take risks. So again, step a little bit outside of your comfort zone. We kind of are in a virtual world right now where it's way easier to say, can I have 15 minutes of your time, compared to previously when it was like, coffee, when does it work for you? Any of those sorts of things. So embrace that idea of taking risks and reach out to someone new and ask for what you want. And that's where it comes back to the personal board of directors. You can socialize that with them to really understand, is this what I want? Is this where I want to go with my career? And then once you're clear on that, you can start sharing that outside of that group.
Yeah, those were some great pointers right there, Erin, because we usually come across, I think it's seen more right now about the imposter syndrome, right? I think that's a great way of like verifying or without judging yourself, having that comparison done, like, okay, I know this and I know, in the industry, this is done. So if I compare, I think I might be doing the right thing. So that's how you kind of develop. I think it's more of a practice that you need to do consistently, so that, there might be points where you feel low, there might be points where you feel like you don't know anything. But that comparison kind of gives you that comfort, saying that, you're good enough to speak, you're good enough to share your thoughts, sort of that. On that note, Patience, what are your thoughts on like how do you work on your inner self, and what leaders should be doing to encourage more about this?
I actually love that the issue of imposter syndrome came up, because I think it's something that developers really have to deal with a lot of the time. I used to think it was especially so when you start off your career, but like the more experience you get, the more you feel like I'm not as good as so and so. And I'm just so glad that it came up. One of the things that I found helpful for me to be able to overcome it, although I do get it sometimes, and I still have to deal with it on and off. The first thing that I did was to work with my manager to actually find out what I was expected to do and how well I was doing with the work that I've been given, what his or her expectations were at the time, and whether I'd met them. And the second thing that I did was that I stumbled upon Women Who Code, and I joined, and I actually got to the point where I was lucky enough to be selected to be a director. But through that journey, I actually made strong connections with people. I have people that I can speak to and ask how things are going in their career. I actually know what other people are dealing with in their own careers, and I don't have to make the same mistakes over and over again because there are people around me who've already gone through that, and I can take a portion out of their journey and apply it into my own life. The third thing that I actually did was, outside of that, go and join other meetups that were not Women Who Code, that were not related to my professional work environment, just other general meetups that actually had nothing to do with my work. And through there, I formed connections with other people who were in executive positions in different companies, which had nothing to do with development, but who could share information and insight onto what people really looked at when they were trying to find out if you're the kind of person who would succeed in a particular position. And out of that, I actually got to a point where I felt fairly comfortable that I was doing well in my role. And out of that confidence that I was portraying and projecting, everyone around me thought, well, she's really good at her role. And in the end, I just kept progressing and progressing. So that's something that I would definitely advise other people to do.
Yeah, I think that those were like some great thoughts right there, patients, like talking about how the value of mentor is being realized. Getting to know, like, okay, what should I be doing to get there? How how mentorship is going to play a role there, and also having a support network, and also like, once you have that, once you're it kind of builds your confidence, and that's how you kind of bring out the name in you, like, saying that I'm good at this, good at this job. I know we're almost ending at the session, so it's 4:27. Just wanted to summarize, like, the thoughts around how to find your inner voice, and how it's impacting the ecosystem, as well as what are the tools that you kind of have to work on that. Any other additional thoughts, panel? Any thoughts or any questions that audience has?
Jumping on to Karen's question a little bit more back again is that, yes, I know this has been really tough with hiring managers, and challenge them, just constantly challenge them. I've faced a brick wall, and I'm breaking that brick wall. Guess what? I've got one little hole, and I'm going to continue breaking that wall. But back again, the reason where she internally, the organization why I founded that is to help me find a voice. Like, there's me, breaking that wall. But if I can get another 5 or 10 individuals to join me, then we can break that wall faster. And if 10 of us say the same thing, or challenge those hiring managers, or challenge the recruiting individuals, like, I see this so often when, even my own experience, that you're not being hired, because this is more on the hiring question. And I challenge, when I was not that long ago, someone external reached out to me and said, hey, we're interested in working, hiring you. And so I had a conversation. Halfway through that conversation, the leader said, oh, you're based in Vancouver. I can't, we need someone in Toronto. The role was 100% remote, by the way. And still, the concept of, I still can't, even though we're in COVID and I get that question, it wasn't a right fit. Simple. I wasn't the right fit. They weren't the right fit for me. And it was to say, you know what, I'm not interested, and walk away from that opportunity, because we've got to speak up, and we've got to challenge these recruiters and hiring managers, because nobody else is challenging them.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just gonna pick up a question right there in the chat. So, any suggestions about how to nurture mentor relationships once you have initiated them? Anybody want to speak about that? Or
I can take that on. I once approached someone to be my mentor. I was very excited about it. And one of the things that she shared with me at the beginning of our journey was that most people would come to her and they would say they want a mentor, and she would agree. And then they would talk about what their goals were, what they were looking to achieve. And then the person would go away and it would be radio silence. And then somehow maybe that person expected her to reach out to them and ask how things are going and so on, but that's not how she felt that the relationship should work. So I would say that in order to nurture the relationship, make sure you're proactive, make sure you reach out frequently and provide updates on the goals that you've set for each other. Make sure you're continually checking in. If it's a regular coffee date, set a regular coffee date so that you're able to meet and check on goals, and it show them that you're really interested in maintaining the relationship.
Sure. Thank you for sharing. I think we're end of the session, but if there are any other questions that audience would like to talk about, panel is right here. All right. Looks like we're good. Thanks everyone for joining. Thank you, audience, for joining the session. Thanks, Erin, Arti, and Patience for joining the session as well. All right. Have a good day. Thanks, everyone.